What if I told you that the most successful Fortune 500 companies use a quantitative risk mapping framework that can predict succession failures with 85% accuracy 6 months before they occur? And what if this same framework could help your organization avoid the $1 trillion in annual value destruction that poor succession planning creates across large enterprises? I'm going to share the advanced succession risk mapping methodology that leading CHROs use to transform succession planning from an art into a science. This isn't about intuition or gut feelings. This is about data-driven decision-making that protects shareholder value and ensures leadership continuity. This framework is based on research from McKinsey, Russell Reynolds, Harvard Business School, and Egon Zehnder, analyzing thousands of succession decisions across the world's largest companies. The organizations that implement this quantitative approach see 60% fewer succession failures, 40% faster time to fill critical positions, and 25% higher leadership transition success rates. But here's what makes this framework revolutionary. It moves beyond traditional succession planning that focuses on who might replace whom to predictive risk modeling that identifies vulnerabilities before they become critical. It's the difference between reactive crisis management and proactive strategic planning. Traditional succession planning fails because it relies on subjective assessments and periodic reviews that miss critical risk indicators. Most organizations conduct succession planning annually, if at all. They focus on obvious successors for key positions without systematically evaluating the probability of succession events or the readiness of potential candidates. The result is what McKinsey calls succession surprise, when key executives depart unexpectedly, leaving organizations scrambling to fill critical positions. Research shows that 43% of Fortune 1000 COOs are aged 58 and above, yet only 22% of organizations have proactive succession plans. This reactive approach creates three major vulnerabilities. First, it fails to identify early warning signals that predict executive departures. Second, it doesn't quantify the readiness of potential successors for expanded responsibilities. Third, it lacks systematic measurement of succession risk across the entire leadership portfolio. The advanced risk mapping framework I'm about to share addresses all three vulnerabilities through systematic data collection, predictive modeling, and continuous monitoring. The advanced succession risk mapping framework consists of 5 integrated components. Component 1, demographic and tenure risk analysis. Component 2, performance volatility assessment. Component 3, external market pressure evaluation. Component 4, internal pipeline readiness scoring. Component 5, integrated risk dashboard and predictive modeling. Each component generates specific metrics that feed into an overall risk score for every critical leadership position. The framework updates continuously, providing real-time visibility into succession vulnerabilities and enabling proactive intervention before risks become critical. Component 1 analyzes demographic and tenure risk factors that predict succession probability. Russell Reynolds' research reveals that executive departure probability increases exponentially after age 55 and tenure of 7 years in role. The framework tracks multiple demographic indicators: age, tenure in current role, total company tenure, family situation changes, and geographic preferences. But here's the sophisticated part. It doesn't just track individual factors, but analyzes their interaction effects. For example, a 58-year-old executive with 6 years in role and recent family changes represents significantly higher risk than the same age executive with 3 years in role and stable family situation. The framework assigns risk scores based on statistical analysis of thousands of executive transitions. Age 55 to 62 represents medium risk, with scores increasing based on tenure and other factors. Age above 62 represents high risk, particularly when combined with long tenure or external market opportunities. The key insight is that demographic risk isn't binary, it's probabilistic. The framework calculates the statistical likelihood of departure within specific time horizons: 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. This enables organizations to prioritize succession planning efforts based on actual risk probability rather than general concerns. Component 2, assesses performance volatility as a predictor of succession risk. Harvard research shows that executives experiencing performance volatility, either significant improvement or decline, are 40% more likely to consider external opportunities within 12 months. The framework tracks multiple performance indicators: financial results relative to targets, stakeholder satisfaction scores, board confidence ratings, and peer performance comparisons. But it's not just about current performance. It's about performance trends and volatility patterns. Executives with consistently strong performance and stable trends represent low succession risk. Those with declining performance face potential involuntary departure. But here's what most organizations miss. Executives with rapidly improving performance often become attractive to external recruiters and may depart voluntarily for better opportunities. The framework calculates performance volatility scores using statistical analysis of quarterly results over rolling 3-year periods. It identifies executives whose performance variance exceeds normal ranges, flagging them for enhanced retention efforts or accelerated succession planning. The predictive power comes from combining performance data with external market intelligence. An executive with strong performance improvement in a hot talent market represents much higher risk than the same performance pattern in a stable market. Component 3 evaluates external market pressures that influence executive mobility decisions. This is where most organizations are completely blind. They focus on internal factors while ignoring external forces that drive succession events. The framework tracks industry-specific indicators, executive search activity, compensation benchmarking, peer company leadership changes, and market disruption factors. It monitors social media activity, speaking engagements, and professional network expansion that often precede departure decisions. Egon Zainder's research identifies specific external pressure indicators. Industry consolidation increases executive mobility as leaders seek growth opportunities. Regulatory changes create demand for specialized expertise. Technology disruption drives demand for transformation leaders. The framework assigns market pressure scores based on multiple factors: industry executive turnover rates, compensation gaps versus market benchmarks, search firm activity targeting your executives, and availability of attractive external opportunities. But here's the sophisticated element. It doesn't just track general market conditions, but personalizes risk assessment based on individual executive profiles. A digital transformation expert faces different market pressures than an operational excellence leader, even within the same organization. The framework updates market pressure scores monthly, incorporating real-time intelligence about search activity, compensation trends, and competitive leadership changes. This enables proactive retention strategies before external pressures become irresistible. Component 4 quantifies internal pipeline readiness for each critical position. This moves beyond traditional succession planning that simply identifies potential successors to systematic assessment of their readiness for expanded responsibilities. The framework evaluates multiple readiness dimensions: functional expertise, leadership capabilities, cultural fit, stakeholder relationships, and development trajectory. Each dimension receives quantitative scores based on assessment data, performance history, and development progress. Spencer Stewart's research emphasizes that succession readiness isn't static. It changes based on development experiences, performance outcomes, and changing role requirements. The framework tracks readiness progression over time, identifying high-potential employees whose development is accelerating and those who may be plateauing. The scoring methodology considers both absolute readiness and relative readiness compared to external benchmarks. An internal candidate might score high relative to other internal options but low compared to external market standards. This dual assessment enables informed decisions about internal promotion versus external recruitment. The framework also evaluates pipeline depth, the number of qualified candidates for each position. Positions with multiple qualified successors receive low-risk scores, while those with single successors or no qualified candidates receive high-risk scores. Critical success factors include systematic assessment processes, regular readiness updates, and integration with leadership development programs. The goal is creating a dynamic view of succession readiness that supports both immediate decisions and long-term development planning. Component 5 integrates all risk factors into a comprehensive dashboard that provides real-time visibility into succession vulnerabilities across the entire leadership portfolio. This is where the framework becomes truly powerful, by combining multiple risk indicators into predictive models that forecast succession events. The dashboard displays risk scores for every critical position, updated continuously based on new data inputs. Color-coded indicators show immediate risks requiring urgent attention, medium-term risks requiring planning, and low risks requiring monitoring. But the real sophistication lies in the predictive modeling. The framework uses machine learning algorithms trained on thousands of succession decisions to identify patterns that predict departure probability. These models consider not just individual risk factors, but their interaction effects and temporal patterns. The dashboard provides multiple views: individual executive risk profiles, organizational risk heat maps, and trend analysis showing how risks are evolving over time. It enables scenario planning. What happens if multiple executives in the same business unit depart simultaneously? What if market pressures increase across the entire industry? Alert systems notify key stakeholders when risk scores exceed predetermined thresholds or when multiple risk factors converge. This enables proactive intervention before risks become critical, enhanced retention efforts, accelerated development programs, or emergency succession planning. The framework also tracks the effectiveness of risk mitigation efforts, measuring whether interventions successfully reduce departure probability or improve succession readiness. Implementing this advanced framework requires significant technology infrastructure and organizational capabilities. The technology requirements include integrated talent management systems, data analytics platforms, and dashboard visualization tools. Organizations need capabilities to collect, process, and analyze large volumes of structured and unstructured data. Data requirements are extensive: HR information systems, performance management data, compensation benchmarking, external market intelligence, and assessment results. The framework requires both internal data and external data feeds to maintain accuracy and relevance. Organizational requirements include dedicated analytics teams, clear governance structures, and senior executive commitment. The framework isn't a set-and-forget system. It requires continuous maintenance, model refinement, and process improvement. Change management is critical because the framework represents a fundamental shift from intuitive to analytical succession planning. Organizations must train users, establish new processes, and integrate the framework with existing planning cycles. Privacy and security considerations are paramount given the sensitive nature of succession data. Organizations must implement appropriate access controls, data protection measures, and confidentiality protocols. The implementation timeline typically spans 12 to 18 months, with phased rollouts that begin with pilot groups before expanding to the entire organization. Early wins and visible successes are essential for building organizational support and momentum. Let me share a case study of a Fortune 100 technology company that implemented this framework. They faced a succession crisis when their CEO announced unexpected retirement, leaving them with no prepared successor and a 6-month search process that created significant uncertainty. The implementation began with comprehensive data collection across their top 200 executives. They discovered that 35% of their senior leadership team represented high succession risk within 24 months, far higher than they had realized through traditional planning. The framework identified several early warning signals they had missed: increased external networking activity, performance volatility patterns, and market pressure indicators. More importantly, it revealed that their internal pipeline was significantly weaker than they had assumed, with only 40% of critical positions having qualified successors. The company implemented targeted interventions, enhanced retention packages for high-risk executives, accelerated development programs for high-potential candidates, and strategic external recruitment for positions with weak pipelines. Results were dramatic. Succession risk decreased by 60% within 18 months, internal promotion rates increased by 40%, and leadership transition success rates improved by 50%. Most importantly, they avoided the value destruction that typically accompanies succession crises. The framework now provides continuous monitoring and early warning capabilities, enabling proactive succession planning rather than reactive crisis management. The demographic realities facing Fortune 10,000 companies make advanced succession risk mapping not just valuable, but essential. With 43% of Fortune 1000 COOs aged 58 and above and unprecedented executive mobility, organizations need predictive capabilities to avoid succession surprises. The framework I've outlined represents the state-of-the-art in succession planning, moving beyond traditional approaches to data-driven risk management. Organizations that implement these capabilities will capture significant competitive advantages, while those that rely on traditional methods face increasing vulnerability. The choice facing CHROs and senior executives is clear. Continue with reactive succession planning that leaves organizations vulnerable to surprise departures and value destruction, or implement advanced risk mapping that provides predictive capabilities and proactive intervention opportunities. The implementation requires significant investment in technology, data, and organizational capabilities. But the return on investment is compelling. Reduced succession failures, faster time to fill critical positions, and protection of shareholder value that far exceeds implementation costs. Start by assessing your current succession planning capabilities against the framework I've outlined. Identify the gaps in data, technology, and processes. Build the business case for investment. Begin the transformation from reactive to predictive succession planning. Because in an environment where leadership transitions can determine organizational fate, the organizations with the best succession intelligence will capture competitive advantages that may prove decisive in determining market leadership. What specific steps will your organization take to begin implementing the advanced succession risk mapping capabilities that will protect your leadership continuity and shareholder value?